What's with that attitude? You're a wife, no, a glaring mother-in-law. I've decided to live with Mom. If you don't like it, let's get a divorce. My husband calmly announced something shocking. What are they talking about? Am I supposed to go back home and do all the housework, even though I'm at my parents' house to give birth? And what does living together even mean? If you let Mom help with childcare, you should be able to focus on the housework. Where has the kind husband I knew gone? I was overwhelmed with sadness, anger, and now despair. Isn't that weird? That was my brother, reacting to the story. Listen, will you try doing what I say tomorrow? My brother begins to explain a plan to uncover the truth. My name is Gina, and I'm 32 years old. I'm pregnant with my first child, who is due very soon. I'm planning to go back to my parents' house tomorrow because the due date is near. No. Don't lift heavy things when you're so pregnant, I'll do it. My husband, Neil, worried and packed in my stead. He was very kind and reliable. Don't live sloppily even when I'm not around. Our new house, which was just completed last year, was kept clean because of my habits of tidying up. Of course, I'll keep it clean and wait for you to come out. My husband said this while rubbing my belly. It was a very happy moment. However, one phone call shattered that happiness. My mood suddenly dropped as I saw the name displayed on the screen. Hello, Gina. The sharp voice of my mother-in-law pierced my ears. Aren't you going back to your hometown for childbirth? I told you to stop because it's disgraceful. I was utterly exhausted from her daily calls. While she appeared kind on the surface, her remarks and criticisms towards me never ceased. Are you just lazing around at home? Well, that must be nice. You are hungry? You're eating too much. Planning to gain more weight. You're already fat enough. And she boasted about her own parenting experience, continuing to lecture me day and night. My son turned out fine because I raised him right, so you won't go wrong following my advice. I was all about breastfeeding and using cloth diapers. I don't remember struggling at all, Gina. You're just being spoiled. The worst part was her comparing me to my husband's ex-girlfriend. His previous girlfriend was bright, honest, and a good girl. Why are you so defiant? I was at a loss for words. This situation was so stressful that I asked my husband several times to make it stop, but the calls never ceased. My kind husband probably found it hard to speak up. However, if this continues even after the child is born, I don't think I can tolerate it. Gina, are you listening? Yes, I'm listening. Don't go back to your hometown. What are you thinking, leaving my poor baby Neil alone? What about you? How can you still think of a grown-up man as a baby? We live in the same city, so I can come back quickly. It's not about the distance. But I've already informed my parents. Your parents? Whose child are you planning to have? Once again, an anachronistic remark from my mother-in-law bursted out. Is it not my child? Saying something like that would surely enrage her. At that moment, my husband took the call instead. Mom, didn't I tell you before? I have an important business trip starting tomorrow until the due date, so it's safer for Gina to go back to her hometown. Hey, did we talk about that? We decided together. Neil, why would you say that? Then, can you take care of her instead, Mom? I can't do that. My mother-in-law answered immediately. I would also like to refuse. She can't manage housework at all, and her house was always a mess. Moreover, she had 2 dogs and 2 cats, which are very cute, but kept in a way that was not hygienic. I suspect I'm allergic to cats, so even the midwife advised me not to go there. I have to take care of the dogs and cats, so I can't look after Gina. Then it can't be helped, right? Why does it turn out like this? I gave birth alone and went back to work right away. Gina is just being spoiled. Mom, is it okay if something happens to your grandchild? I didn't say anything like that. My husband took his time calming down my mother-in-law, who was not conducive to discussion. It's probably not that she had any ill intentions. I understand she was enthusiastic as someone with parenting experience, and she was probably just excited about her first grandchild. However, with me being pregnant, I couldn't accommodate her. I was truly grateful that my husband stood up for me. Don't worry, it's all right. Encouraged by my husband, I went ahead with the plan and returned to my parents' home as scheduled. If there were no issues, I would stay at my parents' house until the baby's 1-month checkup. In addition to my parents, my brother's family lives on the same property, and they have 3 children, the youngest of whom was just born recently. My sister-in-law was experienced, so she should be able to support me smoothly through childbirth. Though I felt lonely with my husband away, it was comforting to have my mother, who is good at cooking and caring, and my sister-in-law, who is experienced in childcare. I spent some peaceful time at my parents' house for a while. The day before the due date, labor began, and I gave birth safely. My husband was still on a business trip. It was unfortunate that he couldn't make it, but I sent him an email with photos to announce the arrival of our new family member. It's unavoidable that one can't choose the timing of childbirth. I'm still not in perfect health postpartum, but I'm working hard to care for the newborn. Despite my studies, it was a struggle since this was my first child. The baby cried day and night, and just holding them made my shoulders stiff. I was busy every day breastfeeding and changing diapers. The pain from childbirth still lingered, and my sleep was light. I was exhausted as my physical recovery wasn't going as planned. Yet, nothing compared to the sweetness of my child. I could look at my child forever. Even its crying face moved me, overflowing with vitality. I was really grateful that the hospital had banned visits as a precaution against infections. If my mother-in-law had been there, I might have been drained, not just physically but mentally as well. The day of discharge came all too quickly. My husband was supposed to come pick me up, but a sudden work issue came up, and my brother came instead. I understand that work is important, but I really wanted to show our child to my husband soon. He was so looking forward to it, he's sure to be overjoyed. However, 3 days passed, then a week, and still my husband hadn't come to visit. Isn't that weird? Our child has been born, you know? I thought he would come rushing over right away. Both my parents and my brother's family were concerned as well. I knew he was busy with work even before the birth, but I thought he could at least make some time to visit. Now I was starting to get a bad feeling. I messaged him to call me when he had some free time, but he ignored the message, and my anxiety was growing. I tried calling him when I thought he'd be done with work, but he didn't answer. Why was that? Finally, he called back, but it was almost midnight. "Oh, you were awake." "Huh. I thought you were sleeping." Does anyone normally call thinking the other person might be asleep? More importantly, I was relieved to finally be able to talk. I was just feeding the baby. But are you really that busy? Yeah, a bit. He sounded just like always, as if he couldn't sense my worry or urgency. Come quickly and see the baby. We also need to register the child's birth. What's wrong? That's something anyone can do, right? Huh. Despite it being late at night, I couldn't help raising my voice. Sorry, I'm just really busy right now. I understand, but still. Just then, our child, who had just been fed a little while ago, started crying again. Next, is it time for a diaper change? The name we decided on before is fine, no changes. What? I saw the baby's face in the email. Please submit the documents. Wait, but I have to get up early tomorrow, so I'm hanging up. The call ended unilaterally just like that. For a moment, I was so shocked that my thoughts froze. Gradually, sadness began to well up inside me. No matter how busy, being treated so impersonally felt awful. Postpartum, my emotions were unstable, and being spoken to in such a manner just made me sigh deeply. But perhaps this was the reality. My beloved child was right in front of me, but for my husband, his daily life hadn't changed. Maybe switching to becoming a parent overnight was hard for him. I thought seeing our child's face might change his feelings. I considered returning home earlier than planned for my husband's sake, but my mother and sister-in-law persuaded me not to push myself. Still, I had a bad feeling. My husband's indifferent attitude bothered me. Even the incessant calls from my mother-in-law before the birth had stopped. I sent several emails, but no replies came. It's not that I was waiting for her to contact me, but I was anxious about what was happening. While I pondered this, the days filled with caring for the newborn continued. Before I knew it, 2 weeks had passed. Eventually, my brother registered my child's birth. My parents helped out during the day, so I could sleep relatively well. My strength was gradually returning. Suddenly, I received a call from my husband. Hello, Neil. I have something to tell you. Unlike me, cheerful at the thought of finally meeting, Neil's voice was serious. Is something wrong? Can you come back home right now? Right now. What's so urgent all of a sudden? Our child had just fallen asleep, and I was still in my pajamas. What's the matter? Is there a problem? Just come back right now. I could sense something unusual in Neil's voice. What could have happened when he said right now? It must have been something extremely serious. I left our child with my mother, who couldn't hide her distress, and got into the car, still in my pajamas. What could have happened? Drive safely, don't rush. I told myself, trying to stay calm, but the red lights seemed longer than usual, and I grew increasingly anxious. About 10 minutes later, I arrived at home. With a sense of caution, I clutched my mobile phone tightly as I entered the house. In the living room, Neil and my mother-in-law were there, relaxing and drinking tea. What? This was nothing like the dire scenario I had imagined, and I stood there dumbfounded. As I tried to grasp what was happening, I noticed something odd about the house. What's going on here? The small plant from the shelf, the stuffed animals from the cushions, the clock that was on the wall. They were all gone. I got rid of them because they weren't to my taste. There was no sign of regret on my mother-in-law's face. These were things I was deeply attached to. And I'm using the room at the back on the second floor. I couldn't understand what she meant. Looking at Neil for help, his face was colder than I had ever seen it. Neil, why did you urgently call me back? What's going on? Answer me. Neil remained silent, and it was my mother-in-law who spoke. I can't tolerate this anymore. What? How long do you plan to stay away from home? You are a wife, so you should do your duties around the house. Come back quickly and prepare our dinner. I couldn't comprehend her words. I was too stunned to react. I was supposed to stay at my parents' house until the baby's 1-month checkup. What's with that attitude? You're a wife, no. A glaring mother-in-law. Desperately, I managed to ask Neil, "What is this all about?" Neil answered calmly, "I've decided to live with my mother." What? If you don't like it, let's get a divorce. Wait a minute, what's happening? Did I do something wrong? I don't understand. Why? Tears ran down my face as I pleaded. Seeing this, Neil and his mother looked at each other and laughed. Are we going to live together or not? Which is it? At that moment, 2 dogs and 2 cats ran down the stairs from the second floor. I sneezed unexpectedly. Yes, these pets are coming with me too. They're my precious family. Haven't I told you that I might be allergic to cats? What are you talking about? You haven't been diagnosed, have you? It might just be in your head. I hurriedly covered my face with a handkerchief, but my eyes and nose began to itch. Upon closer inspection, I noticed that the wallpaper and pillars were scratched in places. Apparently, these were marks from clawing. Our new house was being ruined. I couldn't possibly live with untrained pets and a baby. I was baffled why Neil, who knew about my allergy, would suggest such a living arrangement. Why are we starting to live together now? I can't accept this at all. If you let Mom help with the childcare, you can focus on the household chores. Don't make decisions selfishly. And why did you throw away my things without asking? Well, they were in poor taste. What? I didn't want to hear that from a mother-in-law who goes shopping in an old jersey her son used to wear. Neil said, "Just make dinner quickly." But I began to doubt if this was really my husband. I was overwhelmed by despair, beyond sadness and anger. He didn't even care about how our child was doing now. My confused mind recalled the face of my child, and I finally regained my composure. I don't need such a husband, such a father anymore. Talking was useless. I decided to divorce. The tears weren't from sadness, but from my cat allergy. I hurried back to my parents' house. The moment I saw my sleeping child's face, I couldn't stop the tears anymore. Seeing me in tears, my brother became concerned and asked what had happened. I explained how I was forced into living together and how the house had been completely changed. Even though the cats were no longer there, I couldn't stop crying. "Isn't that strange?" my brother said, tilting his head. "Suddenly all this happened. I wonder if something else is going on? Maybe," he murmured to himself. "Are we just going to leave it like this? I hate it, but I don't know what to do." You hate it, right? Of course. I'm angry, confused, and frustrated. Listen, will you try doing what I say tomorrow? The next day. I put on an apron and a mask and headed back to the house where my husband was. The floors of the house hadn't been cleaned and were covered with pet hair. Laundry and trash were scattered everywhere, making the sanitary conditions poor. Without complaining, I began to clean each room diligently. My mother-in-law watched contentedly. It seems like you finally understood your duties as a wife. Bring the grandchild over quickly. Yes, I'll bring them as soon as I finish cleaning. When will you be done? By tomorrow. That's too late. Hurry up. Sorry. I'll make sure everything is spotlessly clean so that you and the pets can be comfortable. That's only natural. Let her say what she likes. I smirked to myself. Then, I'll come back tomorrow. Please do. Unaware of anything, my mother-in-law acted arrogantly. This was her last moment of reprieve. The plan was progressing smoothly. Back at my parents' house, I hugged my child, whom my mother had been looking after. My mother-in-law had been urging me to bring the grandchild quickly. I was at my limit. I would never let her hold my child. My brother, who had been waiting, played a video that had been recorded. The screen showed my mother-in-law and my husband. It was footage taken today with a small camera I had set up in the house while I was cleaning. Once the cleaning is done and the house is tidy, we'll get her to leave. A little pressure and she'll fold. Hurry up, she is waiting for me. See, that's why I always said you were better off with your ex-girlfriend? I really should have listened to you, Mom. That daughter-in-law is stubborn, unfriendly, and allergic to cats. I only appreciate her for giving me a grandchild. My girlfriend and I don't want kids anyway. That's fine. I'll raise the grandchild and have them take care of me in the future. What outrageous things were they saying? Anger welled up from the depths of my heart. The latest cameras really are great. While my brother seemed impressed, I had no room to listen to that conversation. I felt so angry I was nauseous. And then I understood that it really was as I had suspected. They never intended to live together from the start. They were planning to take over our home, control my child, drive me out, and restart life with the ex. After leaving my child with our mother, my brother and I quickly left the house. Watch out. I cannot forgive the things you've done and your petty schemes. Seeing me return unexpectedly, they were shocked. Did you come back to continue cleaning? Yes, exactly, I replied. This time, I've come to dispose of a big piece of trash. My brother is here to help. Don't make a fuss. Of course. Now, if you both would kindly proceed to the trash can. What? Confused, they hesitated, so I decided to explain in detail. It's not me who is being driven out, it's you. Their complexions changed. What are you talking about? I'm opposed to the forced cohabitation plan. I cannot accept being driven out so his ex-girlfriend can move in. What? I appreciate the divorce. However, I absolutely will not let go of my child. Why are you saying this? As the two became panicked, my brother calmly said, "Everything was recorded on camera. We have the footage." A camera? Don't joke around. How did you? I placed it today while cleaning. As I answered calmly, they exclaimed, "What?" That's an invasion of privacy. Doing something like that without permission, isn't that a crime? The two of them were furious. I remained composed and explained, "I installed the camera for your mother's sake." What do you mean? For my sake? Yes, I thought it would be helpful for you to be able to watch over your precious pets while you were away. During a test, I accidentally overheard your conversation. What did you say? My husband's face turned pale. Hey, I really want to hear this. While I was risking my life giving birth to your child, what were you doing? He stammered, seemingly at a loss for words. Mother, do you maybe know anything about this? After all, you liked his ex-girlfriend, didn't you? Was this your doing? It's not my fault. I just came over to make dinner for my son who had returned from a business trip, and there she was. And it was you who suggested that the three of us live together in this house, wasn't it? I was only hiding your affair to make things easier for you. The two of them desperately continued making excuses. Why did you bring the ex-girlfriend home? Was the business trip a lie? It wasn't a lie. I just happened to run into her while on the trip, and we went out for drinks after a long time, and one thing led to another. One thing led to another, he flustered. I glared at my husband, my disgust evident. It wasn't intentional, but she started saying how pitiful I was, being neglected by you. Huh. I was incredulous at his words. Neglected. Who has been neglecting whom? In fact, isn't that true? You always used pregnancy as an excuse to avoid going out or eating together. My feelings have been continuously ignored. What are you talking about? You agreed that it was okay. I never agreed. I've been enduring it. Why don't you treat me with importance? I'm always kind, but you never appreciate it. My husband's behavior turned defiant and childish. It was unbelievable that an adult would say such things. Was this his true self? I felt utterly disappointed. Comparing himself to our unborn child and voicing grievances was completely beyond my comprehension. Then, my ex said, "Whenever you're tired of being a dad, I'm here to comfort you." And while I was away at my parents' house, she had been comforting him. What did she mean by being a dad? Nothing had even started yet. I picked up my smartphone and called the woman who should be part of this conversation. I had already spoken with her. My brother had found her through social media and explained the situation, and she promptly gave us her contact information. "Hello, I apologize for calling again. It seems my husband is still misunderstanding the facts, so could you please reiterate what you confirmed earlier?" I set the smartphone to maximum volume and switched it to speaker mode, directing it towards my husband. The ex-girlfriend responded, slightly irritated. "I didn't do anything. He invited me over saying he had something to give me, and all I did was listen to his complaints about his wife. Then his mother showed up, and the two of them got carried away with their conversation, and it was just a nuisance for me. I left as soon as I could. Honestly, I'm not fond of his mother, and I myself am married with children now, so I don't want any more involvement." My husband and mother-in-law were dumbstruck. "Eh? She dislikes me." "Ah? I might not remember because I was drunk. I didn't know she was married. Is one of you lying?" My cold question was met with a wry smile from Neil. "It's her. She just ran away because things got awkward, right? So really, I'm the victim here. You'll forgive me, right? Of course I'll forgive you too." There was nothing I wanted forgiveness for. Neil continued to avoid eye contact. He was clearly lying. My disgust grew. I shook off his hand as he tried to forcefully grab mine. "Don't touch me with those filthy hands. I think it's natural for you to be angry right now. But someday you'll be able to forgive me. I was deceived by my loneliness, duped by my ex-girlfriend, and persuaded by Mom, and I hurt you. We can start over from scratch." "Start over from scratch? Huh? Are you still drunk? What? I finally understood your true nature. I'm so glad I realized this before letting you hold our child." "What? I can't hold my child?" "Of course not. The same goes for your mother. It's wrong that I can't hold my grandchild. Listen, I want to start over. I think I can change if I see the child's face. I can't believe those words, having seen him say, "We don't need kids." On the pet camera, there was no way his plea would move me. "You're the ones who wanted a divorce, right? I can't raise a child with someone so immature they don't even know what should be prioritized. You're going to take a father away from his child. Don't suddenly act like a father. A father like you is better off not being around. Start over from zero with your mother and get all the praise you want." I said this calmly. Neil's shoulders sagged in disappointment. Just then, the mother-in-law seemed to have an idea and said something. You've been so arrogant, but I'll sue you for secretly recording. And I'll also sue for the crime of taking away my grandchild and for disrespecting the elderly." How can she make up such bold stories? My brother, puzzled but calm, responded, "That lawsuit would certainly fail. It would be better for you not to pursue it. What do you know? It's a loss not to fight back. I can win if I sue." The mother-in-law was smug, but she was unaware of my brother's profession. Quietly, he took out his business card. "What? You work at a law firm?" "Yes, speaking as an attorney, I must tell you that it's a case we cannot take. Pursuing this lawsuit would be a waste of effort and money." Facing their astonished looks, I pressed on. "Indeed, not fighting back would be a loss. We will also file a suit and request a fair division of property from the two of you." What? Just then, the cats woke up from their nap and started meowing. Before my allergies act up, it's time to leave. Wait a minute. You're kidding, right? Can't be. Leaving the clamoring pair behind, I returned to my parents' home, where my beloved child waited. Later, the divorce was finalized. What I sought was a lump sum payment for property division and child support. My husband protested the divorce, claiming, "It's unfortunate for both the child and myself." Who is truly unfortunate here? It's me, betrayed by my husband, and our child who had no choice but to have such a father. It was clear this man was not suitable to be a father. The criticism from the mother-in-law was even worse. Doesn't the future of an elderly woman and 4 pets matter? It's pitiful that a grandchild has to be raised by such a terrible mother. I dismissed her criticism outright. Please don't drag the pets into this. I was relieved that my mother-in-law, who had plans to make my child take care of her, was gone. I wanted my child to live freely. They said they at least wanted to continue living in the house we had just built. It was a jointly owned house, but since my personal space had been violated, I no longer wanted to live there. Eventually, considering the lump sum payment for child support, I decided to sell the house. The house became someone else's, and I received the sale proceeds in one lump sum. A refreshing feeling of starting anew. Since this was what my ex-husband wanted, he must be satisfied. In fact, my brother skillfully manipulated the two of them, quickly steering the situation towards a resolution. I was always being supported. "I'm sorry for involving you in this situation." I apologized, and my brother said, "It's natural for me to protect my sister, and when a good person shows up next, make sure to introduce him to me first." My still concerned brother said, "For now, I plan to focus on raising my child. I don't have the luxury of time to scrutinize men." Yet, despite thinking this, I ended up exchanging contact information with a classmate from middle school when I ran into him at the hospital during an allergy test. He was a nurse, extremely busy, and our relationship continued with occasional emails amidst our busy lives. Incidentally, the test confirmed that I indeed had a cat allergy. I really like cats, so it was disappointing. A few years after saying, "Let's have dinner when things settle down," we finally started dating, and after several more years, we got married. Over a long period, My brother and I took the time to determine whether he was suitable to be a father to my child. Now we will build happiness together. I never imagined you would grow up to be so splendid. You truly are my child. I am proud of you. When I was 12, my mother, along with my 6th sister, suddenly disappeared. For a long time there was no contact, and I didn't know where they were, but one day, when I had grown up, my mother suddenly appeared at my workplace. It seems that she had accidentally heard somewhere that I graduated top of my class from a medical school. She showed up in front of me again, trying to conveniently use me for her own purposes. What did she want after all this time? It was far too selfish. After she left me alone when I was still only 12, I only felt disgust towards her when she approached me as soon as I was successful, and it even felt creepy. The reason I wanted to become a doctor was to help my suffering sister and others like her. It was not for my mother. What do you want now? I am no longer your daughter. Please go home. When I calmly rejected her, my mother showed a momentary look of confusion. Despite my strong desire to cut ties with my mother, I couldn't help but worry about my sister, and I started to think if I could at least give her a medical examination. When I looked at my sister, she didn't say anything, but I could clearly see that she was asking for help with her eyes. In that moment, I impulsively pushed my sister's wheelchair and rushed into the examination room nearby. "Wah, Rebecca. I missed you." As soon as we entered the room, my sister suddenly started crying. With those tears, she recounted the events of the past 14 years, and I was lost for words. I have resolved never to let my mother have her way again. I am Rebecca, a 26-year-old working adult. Although my days are busy, I am now living my life feeling happy. However, my current peaceful life feels like a miracle, and my childhood was far from happy, filled with ongoing difficulties. My life changed drastically when I was 10. Our family's pillar, my father, suddenly passed away due to an illness. When my father was alive, we were a close-knit and ordinary family. My parents were very kind, and my sister was adorable, so I lived a happy life. However, such peaceful days crumbled in an instant when my father died. The first to change was my mother. Originally mentally fragile and prone to emotional swings, she became even more unstable after losing my father, and she started to grow increasingly irritable in everyday life. She began to yell more at my sister and me. We were still young and were simply shocked and confused by our mother's transformation. We couldn't understand why she had changed so much and could only surrender to the situation. When my father was alive, he would notice any changes in my mother right away and would calm her down, so we didn't take it too seriously. My mother had always been dependent on my father, so when he reprimanded her, she quickly calmed down and clung to him almost affectionately. However, with my father's death, she sank into deep sorrow and became so unstable that she would stay locked in her room all day, unable to do anything for a while. As a result, she became unable to go to work and quit her part-time job, spending all day at home. Thankfully, there was enough from my father's estate and life insurance, and moreover, my mother's parents had been wealthy, so she inherited a substantial fortune. Thus, even though my mother didn't work, we did not struggle financially. Nevertheless, my mother's mental state continued to deteriorate. She became overly dependent on and favored my physically weak and frequently ill sister, Kelly, while becoming cold towards me. "I'm hungry, Mom." "Kelly is keeping me busy. What now?" "I'll give you money. Go buy whatever you want." Saying this, my mother handed me some money. However, the amount was only $2, which was enough for just one croissant. Thus, my mother stopped preparing meals for me, and I was unable to have a proper meal at home. Not only that, but using my sister's care as an excuse, she stopped showing up at my school events altogether. For me, my mother's indifference increasingly isolated my heart and made me bear more and more painful feelings. I need to be by Kelly's side, or terrible things will happen. I don't have time to attend your events." My mother refused not only to attend events like sports days and cultural festivals, but also personal interviews with homeroom teachers. Although the school requested interviews several times, my mother convincingly told the teachers that she had to take care of a sick family member. Looking back now, I think there were many problems with my mother's actions. However, even then, to a primary school student like me, my mother was my only parent and someone I could rely on. Because of this, I couldn't rebel against her words and actions and just had to obey. I also loved my sister dearly and was very worried about her poor health. From these feelings, I decided to turn a blind eye to the reality that I was sacrificing myself for my sister. No matter how harsh the words I received from my mother were, I forced myself to listen and tried to alleviate the pain in my heart. As a child, I might have believed that it was important to endure for the sake of my family. Perhaps it would have been better if I had relied more on someone else, but my maternal grandparents had already passed away, and my paternal grandmother was elderly and in a care facility, so I had no close relatives to turn to. That was the situation, so the idea of consulting someone never occurred to me. While my mother treated me coldly, my sister often asked me to play with her. I cherished my sister, and we were truly close. As she did my hair, my sister said, "I want to be a hairdresser once I'm cured." "Kelly, you're so skilled. I can't even braid my own hair." "Really? Then I'll do your hair every day." My sister usually looked pale, but when she played with my hair, her complexion improved, her eyes sparkled, and she looked like a healthy, normal girl to me. However, my mother's attitude towards me worsened even further. What used to be mere coldness had, at some point, turned into my mother verbally abusing me harshly. "Are you really my daughter? Why can't you be like Kelly? I don't need a child like you. It's enough if just Kelly is here." These words, implying that I had no value at all, were all that came from my mother's mouth. At first, I was deeply hurt by her words, but eventually I got used to the situation and started to feel worthless. Furthermore, the time I spent with my sister, whom I loved dearly, was increasingly restricted by my mother. "Don't push Kelly too hard. Can you take responsibility if her condition worsens?" Whenever I was in my sister's room, my mother would always scold me and pull me away from her. We could no longer play together, but instead we started communicating through eye signals, and eventually we could somewhat understand each other's feelings just by looking. On days when my sister seemed well, I felt reassured just by looking into her eyes, relieved by her expression as if to say thank you for taking care of me. Conversely, when she silently pleaded with her eyes that she wanted something to eat, I would secretly pass her a cookie, and she would return a smile as if she had received a treasure. This secret exchange between us sisters deepened our bond even further. However, it seemed that my mother was not pleased with this bond, and perhaps our continued closeness, even when separated, angered her, causing her to yell at me even more. I think my mother couldn't accept that I was independent and capable of handling things on my own. She was a person with a strong desire to be needed by someone. When my father was alive, she satisfied this need by depending on him, but after his death, she lost her object of dependency. As a result, I think she positioned my physically weak sister as a substitute for my father. My mother poured her affection onto my sister and relied on her to fulfill her own needs. On the other hand, having never been able to rely on my mother from a young age and forced to handle everything myself, I think my mother did not see me as a target for her affection. Perhaps my independence was something my mother actually resented. This situation further deepened the rift in our relationship. I can think calmly about things now, but back then, I had no such luxury and had to live a lonely life, receiving cold treatment from my mother after losing my father. I believed that my mother was just irritated because of taking care of my sister, and once Kelly got better, she would show me affection too. Convinced of this, I desperately comforted myself while living. Then, 2 years after my father's death, it was my 12th birthday. An unexpected event occurred. When I returned from school, an unusual silence filled the house. I thought perhaps my mother and Kelly were planning to surprise me for my birthday. As I entered the house, that's what I thought. So, I decided to surprise them instead by finding where they were hiding. I quietly started searching for them. However, I could not find my mother or Kelly anywhere. Moreover, upon closer inspection, I noticed that clothes and personal items were missing from my mother's and Kelly's rooms. What was happening? My feelings of anticipation turned to anxiety, and I began to panic. I searched the house thoroughly again, but still, there was no sign of the two of them, and it wasn't a hospital day for Kelly either, according to the calendar. I was panicked, but I decided to go back to school and honestly tell my teacher what was happening. As I told my story, the teacher initially looked incredulous, but gradually her expression became more serious. After I finished telling everything, the teacher fell silent as if deep in thought, then decided to contact Child Protective Services immediately. After the teacher explained the situation and consulted with them, I was taken into temporary custody by Child Protective Services. I couldn't accept the fact that my mother and sister had suddenly disappeared, and I was bewildered. The only thing I knew was that it seemed my mother had abandoned me. Faced with this reality, a gaping hole opened in my heart. I wondered how my weak sister was doing. What was my mother thinking? Many thoughts welled up, and I cried alone in my blanket. A few days later, I was called by the director of the child welfare facility. I was dizzy from lack of proper sleep, but he told me something. "From today on, this is your home, Rebecca." Those words clearly indicated that I had been abandoned by my mother. Although I had somewhat prepared myself for the fact that my mother might not return, the sadness was overwhelming, and I couldn't stop the tears. Why? Why didn't you take me with you, Mom? Unable to bear it, I cried out loud. The director held me in his arms for a long time. Life at the facility was not particularly inconvenient, and it was a relief not to worry about meals. However, even as I gradually got used to life at the facility, the feelings of loneliness and anxiety never disappeared, and I became mentally exhausted. Various interests I had before entering the facility faded, and I often couldn't sleep at night due to fear in the dark and quiet. The director was very worried as he saw me losing weight day by day. He would talk to me and give me quizzes to distract me. While talking to him, I could enjoy myself, but when alone, I would fall into deep thought and often had sleepless nights. Then, one day, a turning point came. The director approached with a smile and handed me a piece of paper. "You have wonderful abilities. You can become anything. It would be good to take more interest in the things around you." He had given me the results of an IQ test, which I had thought was just a quiz. My IQ was higher than most people's, placing me in the upper tier. Seeing the director more surprised and happy than I was brightened my mood. The cold treatment I received from my mother had made me feel worthless, but the director of the facility couldn't stop praising me. For the first time, this made my heart warm. A little while later, a couple who wanted to be my foster parents appeared. I was suspicious at first, wondering if there was some ulterior motive in their willingness to take in someone else's child. Initially, I didn't trust them. However, as we met several times, those feelings began to fade. They were truly kind people and treated me as if I were their own child. Thanks to them, I gradually began to feel grateful, and before I knew it, I was calling them Mom and Dad. Years passed, and when I became a sophomore in high school, they told me they wanted me to become their child, and I hugged them in happiness. We went through with the adoption, and we officially became a family. Life with my adoptive parents was very fulfilling. However, a few months after we became a family, my adoptive father fell ill. Fortunately, he was quickly taken to the hospital, and the surgery went well. However, he had to stay in the hospital for a while after that, and my adoptive mother became less energetic, possibly due to the exhaustion from caregiving. Seeing my adoptive parents like this, I was reminded of the scene when my biological father passed away. The image of my real father gradually losing his vitality came to mind. My real mother was grieving, and my weak sister, by her side, was smiling with a face that seemed about to fade away. The desire to save even one person suffering from illness grew stronger, and I decided to become a doctor. Afterward, I studied hard and managed to pass the entrance exam for medical school. Having always been good at studying, I was able to enter as a scholarship student. I was really glad that I could enter as a scholarship student because I did not want to burden my adoptive parents with tuition. After entering, I continued to study seriously and, surprisingly, graduated at the top of my medical school class. Afterwards, I passed the national exam on my first attempt and started working as a resident at a university hospital. It was a time filled with learning, and every day was enveloped in tension as mistakes were not allowed when dealing with patients. Though the days were busy and harsh, I felt fulfilled. However, one day something unexpected happened. While I was in the back office, a reception nurse approached me. I thought she was going to ask me something, but instead, she brought surprising news. "Someone is here to see you." I had no idea who could possibly be visiting me. Thinking it might be a patient I had previously treated, I headed to the reception, and there I found, "It's been a while. Do you recognize me?" "Eh?" "Mom, Kelly." Standing before me were my biological mother and sister. Despite it being 14 years since we last met, my mother was smiling and waving at me by name. My sister was sitting in a wheelchair, looking exhausted. I was shocked and confused by this sudden reunion. What could they possibly want after all this time? I had a bad feeling about this, and it didn't seem like it would be a simple matter. Intuitively feeling this, I kept my composure while softening my expression and said to them, "I'm sorry, but can you wait in the lobby for about 30 minutes? I should be able to make some time then." When I said this, my mother brightly responded, "Okay, we'll wait until then," and went to the lobby with my sister. As I watched their backs, anger welled up in me. After leaving me behind, she now appears as if nothing happened and behaves as if we're just a normal family. I couldn't understand why my mother had appeared before me now, but I had a bad feeling about it. Carrying that unease, I finished up my work and hurried to the lobby where they were waiting. As I approached, my mother noticed me and smiled brightly, clearly delighted. Unable to contain my emotions, I confronted her with anger. "Why are you here? What do you want after all this time?" Unperturbed by my icy reception, my mother laughed and replied, "I saw you on TV. I had no idea you had become a doctor, and I was so surprised that I just had to come see you." Indeed, about a year ago, I had discovered a rare disease case and presented it at a major conference with a renowned doctor in that field. Since then, my research had progressed, and recently news had reported that my findings might lead to the development of a new treatment drug, which had gotten some attention. It appears that my mother saw a clip of me giving a speech at the conference on TV and decided to visit me because of it. "I can't believe how well you've grown. You truly are my child. I am so proud of you." While my mother showed a smile, my heart grew colder. I felt disgusted by her approaching me now that I had gained a little fame, after she had abandoned me. "Where have you been all this time since you left me?" Struggling to suppress my urge to shout, I asked her calmly. However, my mother didn't answer my question and started talking about something else. "I have a favor to ask of you." Despite my irritation with her attitude, I was curious about why she had come all this way. What kind of favor was she going to ask for? I braced myself, suspecting it might be a request for financial help. But the words that came from my mother's mouth were far beyond my expectations. "It's just a small thing. If you appear on TV or at conferences in the future, I just want you to introduce me as your mother." "What? Why?" Her request was so unexpected that I involuntarily distorted my face. According to her, she had seen me on TV and then searched for me on the internet to find out more about me. She also learned that I had graduated at the top of my class from university. She thought that if I was smart enough to graduate top of medical school, I would become famous eventually. If that happened, she expected to be recognized as the mother of a famous doctor, and that's why she came to see me, my mother said. I struggled to understand how she could think that way, but what really bothered me was the word mother. Was this person who had abandoned me now pretending to be a mother? She hadn't even made meals properly and had treated me coldly and harshly. Anger was bubbling up inside me, but I managed to suppress it and spoke to her in a calm tone. After you abandoned me, I was adopted by a wonderful couple. They were very kind and loved me as their own child. So my mother is now the woman who raised me, not you. Therefore, I won't introduce you as my mother. When I said this firmly, my mother's face instantly turned stern. How dare you? I am the one who gave birth to you. As long as you are my child, you should listen to me without question. My mother shouted, her expression changing from kind to filled with anger. Once I would have cowered at her yelling and complied with her demands, however unpleasant. But now, things were different. I was an adult and was raised with plenty of love from my adoptive parents. I no longer had any reason to fear my mother's intimidation. I had no intention of interacting with her ever again. With that strong resolve, I firmly told her, I am no longer your daughter. Please go home. When I calmly rejected her, my mother showed a moment of confusion. I hoped she would give up and leave, but what worried me inside was my sister. I wondered if she was all right. Then suddenly, my mother changed her tone and asked, Your sister is ill. We're running out of money, and I have debts, so we're in trouble. Could you help us a little? Mentioning my sister made it hard for me to respond firmly. It seemed like her eyes were pleading for something. After some thought and advice from a colleague, I decided to provide conditional support. The term would be 1 year, with $1,000 each month, on the condition that she seriously repays her debts during this time. I always tended to be soft on my sister. My desire to help her was strong, so I offered my support. For a while it seemed my mother was keeping her promise and repaying the debts. However, one day by chance, I saw my mother shopping at a high-end brand store. Feeling suspicious, I hired a detective agency to investigate her. The results were shockingly worse than I imagined. Far from repaying her debts, my mother was wasting the money I sent on luxury goods and gambling. I immediately stopped the transfers. Furthermore, I decided to take legal action. Even though she was my mother, this could not be condoned. I felt it was outright criminal. As expected, when I stopped the transfers, my mother brought my sister to the hospital again, shouting and making a scene. I had no energy left to talk, and I forgot what was said, but I made it clear that I was ending the assistance. I thought I was helping because you said it was for my sister. If the money is being used for you, then I no longer have any intention of providing financial assistance. I can no longer trust anything you say. We are no longer family, so please do as you wish, that's all. Just like last time, I was terribly worried about my sister's condition. Before she went back with my mother, I wondered if I could at least provide a medical examination for her. Looking at my sister, she didn't say anything, but I could definitely see in her eyes that she was asking for help. When I saw my sister Kelly's eyes after such a long time, they seemed to be pleading for help, and I couldn't help but be concerned about her condition. Instinctively, I grabbed Kelly's wrist to check her pulse. Despite my mother screaming, "Stop it," I ignored her. I was shocked by the thinness of Kelly's wrist. As I was surprised by her frailty, Kelly managed to squeeze out a weak voice. "Rebecca, there's something I need to tell you." Realizing something was wrong with Kelly, I quickly wheeled her into an unused examination room. As I locked the door hastily, my mother was outside banging on it and shouting, "What are you doing? Open the door." My mother was hitting the door as if she would break it, but soon a security guard came and took her away somewhere. "Wah, Rebecca, I've missed you." As soon as we entered the room, Kelly suddenly started crying. Immediately, I hugged her, and tears overflowed from both of us. After crying for a while, Kelly regained her composure and began to tell me what had happened. On the day the two disappeared, my mother suddenly said they were going out. Kelly realized I wasn't there, but my mother said, "Don't worry, we'll meet up with your sister at the place we're going." Having no choice but to believe her, Kelly went with our mother. However, the place they were taken to was far from home, and there was no sign of me, who was supposed to meet up with them. Kelly felt deceived by our mother and said she often cried out of loneliness at first. But each time, she was scolded by our mother, and gradually, she learned to hold back her tears due to fear. While trying not to anger our mother, years passed. Kelly had been frail in her childhood, but gradually her health improved, and she no longer fell ill as often. However, our mother was not pleased by this improvement. My mother enjoyed being seen as the devoted mother supporting her frail daughter and received praise from others for it. To maintain this image, she mentally cornered Kelly and made sure she obeyed. "If you don't listen to me, I'll leave you alone. Then you won't be able to survive," she was told every day. Sometimes she was yelled at loudly. Gradually, Kelly began to feel that she couldn't survive unless she did exactly as our mother said, and it drove her to become mentally ill. Kelly described that time with a very bitter expression. Kelly was brainwashed by our mother, kept isolated in the house, unable to meet anyone, and her meals were restricted to maintain her emaciated state. Our mother falsely claimed that Kelly was sick, and moreover, she forced her to take an unnecessary amount of medication to deliberately worsen her condition, calling the ambulance multiple times. At the hospital she was transported to, she explained that my daughter is mentally ill and took too many pills, and to neighbors, she lied that it was an attack of a chronic condition. As this continued, people around them and the hospital began to grow suspicious. But before the lies were uncovered, our mother took Kelly and moved to another town as if they were fleeing in the night. After repeating this multiple times, Kelly told me she had lived these past years, caught in the scenarios our mother had created. However, it seems our mother grew unsatisfied with just being seen as the devoted mother of a sick daughter. At that time, she happened to see me on TV. Believing that my becoming famous could make her famous too, our mother planned to rebuild a relationship with me, talk about Kelly in front of many people, and gain their sympathy. Kelly had suppressed her feelings due to our mother's pressure, but meeting me after several years made her fear that if she didn't speak up now, this situation would continue. With that, she found the courage to speak. As she talked, perhaps remembering that time, Kelly occasionally shivered. I hugged her tightly. "Thank you for telling me all this. I'll take care of it from now on, so don't worry anymore." Kelly seemed reassured and started crying again. After gently stroking her head, I called the police. Leaving Kelly there, I went to find my mother, who had been taken away by the security guards. I found her, and the guards in a nearby lounge explained the situation to them, and asked, "Could you detain my mother until the police arrive?" Then, I turned to face my mother directly. Hearing everything from Kelly had intensified my anger towards her, and with eyes full of contempt, I said, "I've heard everything from Kelly. No one needs you as a mother. I've called the police." My mother, restrained by the security guards, did not resist and looked resigned. Surprised by my words, she was at a loss for words. Seeing her reaction, I returned to Kelly. After the police arrived, we were interviewed and explained everything that had happened. The police listened to our story and told us they would conduct a thorough investigation before departing. After the interview, Kelly received a medical examination in internal medicine. The results showed that although her leg muscles were weak, she was not so ill as to need a wheelchair permanently, and with rehabilitation, she would be able to walk without problems. It also became clear that she was in a state of severe malnutrition. Apparently, the wheelchair was part of my mother's theatrics, used to garner more sympathy by forcibly placing her in it. What a hopeless thing for a mother to do. Kelly was admitted to the hospital to be on the safe side, and afterward, I took over caring for her. She was discharged but remained overall weakened. It took time, but we focused on her recuperation. When Kelly finally regained her health to a normal level, the court concluded that my mother, who had been detained by the police, was guilty. I had to go to court several times to testify, but my mother continued to make self-centered statements throughout the trial. As I sat at the witness stand, my mother's joyful exclamation, "She's a fine doctor," my child filled me with unease. We knew we would no longer have to see her face. We sighed in relief and exchanged glances of reassurance. As Kelly gradually recovered her health, she began to speak of her dream of becoming a hairstylist, just like she used to. Hearing her say this warmed my heart and made me feel as if I could see a hopeful future ahead. A bright expression appeared on Kelly's face, and she showed a genuine smile. Seeing her smile was the most important thing to me, and I was truly happy that her cheerfulness had returned. I felt that she was going to be all right. With that thought, I decided to introduce her to our adoptive parents so she could make a fresh start. I was excited about the prospect of sharing this new beginning with her. Although the meeting was still some time away, seeing Kelly already nervous and excited made me feel warm inside. I couldn't help but smile. Despite the hustle and bustle at home, I had completed my residency, gained various experiences, and was now beginning my path as an attending physician. I vowed to become a distinguished doctor for my sister, my adoptive parents, and in honor of my Father in heaven. I was determined to meet their expectations and to continue striving every day to be a doctor they could truly trust.